History is not merely the story of kings and wars.
It is the story of a trial, a 6,000-year trial, and every one of us is on record. If there is a creator, then there is also an adversary. And if humanity is being tested, then someone must be administering the examination. And that someone was given dominion, not as an equal to the creator, but as a permitted ruler of the material age. 6,000 years, a lease of authority over the earth, a proving ground designed not for punishment, but for revelation. Many theological traditions contain this provocative idea that the present world is not under the direct governance of the Creator. In certain scriptures, the adversary is called the ruler of this world. In others, the prince of the power of the air.
The implication is staggering.
Corruption we see is not accidental. It is allowed, deliberately, purposefully, because the Creator did not want obedience by default. He wanted character proven under pressure, and so the adversary was given his dominion. 6,000 years to rule the material world. 6,000 years to tempt, to seduce, to corrupt. And humanity was placed inside that dominion and asked to choose. What is temptation? It is not merely indulgence. It is misdirected desire. The adversary does not tempt with ugliness. He tempts with splendor, power, adulation, dominion, greed dressed as ambition, cruelty disguised as strength, deception marketed as progress. The test is subtle. It asks a simple question repeated across every generation, every culture, every century. Will you worship power or truth? Will you choose dominance or righteousness? Will you serve yourself or something greater? Why would a creator allow this at all? Because virtue without opposition is unproven. Light is only visible against darkness. Goodness without temptation is merely innocence, untested, unearned, unverified. The 6,000 years are not punishment. They are filtration, separation, like refining gold under fire. The adversary's role is not creative. It is catalytic. He reveals what is already within us. He does not manufacture evil in the human soul. He simply illuminates what was already there, waiting for the right offer. But humanity was not left without guidance. A book of laws was given to a chosen people, a covenant, a reference guide embedded into the heart of civilization, not because they were superior to others, but because someone had to preserve the standard. Someone had to carry the answer key through the darkness. Law is not restriction for its own sake. It is calibration. Compass in a morally inverted world. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Honor life. Honor truth. Honor the Creator above all earthly power. The law functions as the answer key to the examination. Those who seek light can find it, even in the deepest darkness. The guide was always there. And civilizations were judged not merely by their wars or their monuments, but by what they chose to celebrate, who they elevated, what they rewarded. When greed becomes admired, when corruption becomes normalized, when truth becomes negotiable, and power becomes the only currency that matters. The adversary's dominion is functioning exactly as designed. The test is working. The separation is occurring. The ledger is being written. Now consider the ancient story of the Tower of Babel, a civilization of extraordinary unity and technological ambition, building upward, reaching toward the heavens, not in worship, but in defiance, in self-glorification. The story tells us the Creator looked down and said, if they can do this now, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. And so the project was interrupted. Not because knowledge is evil, but because the civilization had not yet earned the wisdom to wield it. Technology without moral maturity is not progress. It is acceleration toward catastrophe. Babel was a warning encoded in myth, a marker, a sign, that when humanity reaches a certain threshold of technological capability, the end of the cycle is near, and we would do well to remember that. Look around you. We can now split atoms. We can edit the genetic code of living organisms. We have built artificial minds that learn and reason. We have placed in the palm of every human being on Earth a device capable of instant communication with every other human being on Earth. We have built, in essence, a new Tower of Babel, not of stone and mortar, but of fiber and light and code. And just as in the ancient story, nothing we plan to do now seems impossible. This is the sign, not a sign of doom in itself, but a sign of proximity, the approach of the final examination, the closing of the cycle. And here is where the narrative reaches its most extraordinary and most disturbing chapter. At the end of the cycle, the adversary's strategy changes. The temptation that was once subtle becomes visible. The evil that was once hidden in the corridors of power is revealed into the light, not by accident, but by design, by divine design. Because the final judgment requires that no soul can claim ignorance. No civilization can say it did not know. The darkness must be fully exposed before the verdict is rendered. And what is revealed, the worst of it, the deepest evil, the kind that has always existed in the shadows of power and wealth and influence, the kind that preys upon the most innocent, the kind that has been practiced in secret by those who rule the material world. Moloch, an ancient name, an ancient practice, the sacrifice of children to the god of power and gain. It sounds like mythology. It sounds like ancient history. But the name endures because the practice endures. Because the worship of power at the expense of the innocent is not a relic. It is a recurring feature of civilizations that have surrendered entirely to the adversary's dominion. At the end of the cycle, this evil is not merely practiced. It is revealed, dragged into the light, made visible to the entire civilization simultaneously. And here is where the technology becomes not merely a sign, but an instrument of judgment. Because immediate global communication means that when the evil is revealed, everyone sees it. Everyone knows. The excuse of ignorance is nullified. Every soul on earth is confronted with the choice. What do you do with what you now know? Do you look away? Do you rationalize? Do you protect the powerful because it is convenient? Or do you stand in the light and call darkness by its name? The reaction of the civilization to the revelation of evil is itself the final examination. It is the last question on the test, and the answer is being recorded. This is precisely what happened before the flood. The corruption was not hidden. It was open, celebrated, normalized. The violence and the moral inversion were visible to all, and the civilization's response, its collective shrug, its participation, its silence, was the final data point. The ledger was closed. The judgment arrived, not in anger, but in conclusion. The experiment had run its course. The results were in, and the waters came. But notice something profound in that story. The cycle did not immediately restart. There was a pause. A remnant was preserved. A new beginning was seeded. But the story makes clear that at some point, the test is not replicated indefinitely. There is a final cycle. A last examination, after which the conditions that made the test necessary no longer exist. The adversary's dominion expires permanently. The lease ends, and what replaces it is not another age of temptation, but something the human mind has barely been able to imagine. This brings us to the question that has haunted philosophy since the first human being looked up at the stars and asked, "Why are we here? What is the meaning of all of this? Why does suffering exist? Why is evil permitted? Why does the innocent suffer alongside the guilty? Why does the wicked prosper while the righteous struggle?" The answer, if this framework is correct, is both simple and staggering. The meaning of life is ascension, not metaphorical ascension, not merely self-improvement or moral growth in the abstract, but literal elevation, a transition from one state of existence to another, from the material age of temptation and dominion to a new order of being, one not governed by the adversary, one not subject to the corruptions of power and greed and fear, one in which the separation has been completed, and those who pass the test inhabit a reality the present world cannot contain. The 6,000 years were never about blind obedience. They were about alignment, choice, character. The Creator did not want subjects. He wanted souls who had been tested in the fire of the adversary's dominion and chosen light anyway, chosen truth when lies were profitable, chosen mercy when cruelty was rewarded, chosen integrity when corruption was the path of least resistance. Every such choice was a vote, a line in a cosmic ledger, a data point in the final record. And if enough souls pass the test, if the civilization as a whole demonstrates sufficient moral maturity in the face of the final revelation of evil, then the ascension is collective. Humanity moves forward together. Into what, we cannot fully articulate. But the traditions that have preserved this framework across millennia use words like paradise, the kingdom, the new age, the world to come, not as poetic consolation, but as literal destination. The adversary rules this age, but not the next one. The clock has been ticking for 6,000 years. The Tower of Babel has been rebuilt in silicon and light. The evil is being revealed. The reaction is being recorded. The final examination is underway. And the question is not whether the cycle ends. The question is what we do, right now, with what we know.
History is not something that happened to other people in other times. It is happening to us.
And it is being read. Thank you for watching.